Thank you for having us in Goa once again in your beautiful studio home. And we're just catching Keren right before she leaves for her flight to the US to discuss her artworks because they really have a lot of depth in it. So we want to delve deeper. Your mother had a very different background and a Holocaust survivor as well, and a very talented theater and stage actor. So, how did her personal history affect your perspective on art and life and the world in general?
Well, wow. And so I think that her experiences of having been uprooted from her home, suddenly like that, made her always like feel like an outsider. She never really kind of fully kind of integrated. And she kind of, oh, coconuts falling.
Welcome to Goa.
And so I think that kind of fortunately, there or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, there was like a whole lot of artists and people who were expressing themselves that who came from like a similar milieu, had also similar experiences and were expressing that in all sorts of different ways, which was really fascinating and obviously gave. I'm sure gave my mother like a lot of comfort and camaraderie. So it was also like very interesting as well because there was there wasn't just necessarily like a quest for like beauty. There was also like a lot of questioning going on in all the art forms, and there was um, like holding up the art was being held up as like a mirror to maybe like human madness and atrocities, but at the same time like solutions were being like presented as well, which is like very very interesting. So, for example, Bertolt Brecht's Mother Courage, or I think it's also called Caucasian Chalk Circle, which is like actually based on a story, a fable. It's a real, a real moment in time that happened with King Solomon when he adjudicated between two mothers over a baby. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but it's really quite amazing. So one of the women had had a baby, and sadly, tragically, something happened to it. And the other woman had a baby, and the woman without the baby, like, decided that this other baby was hers. So they were fighting over this baby, and so they were told to go to King Solomon to adjudicate over the situation. And so he said, he listened to both of their stories and he said, right, okay, so in that case, what we must do is we must cut the baby in half. That's the fairest thing to do. And so the mother, the actual mother of the baby, like rushed forward and said, no, no, don't hurt the baby, it's fine. Just leave the baby whole. Kind of, she can have the baby, but leave the baby whole. And we knew and found out who the true, real mother was. And so that was like adapted by Bertolt Brecht into a play. And it was put into a kind of a Russian peasant kind of context. Also, like you have the same thing with like Arthur Miller's The Crucible, which is an amazing play, which was like actually based on the McCarthy trials that were going on, raging on at the time. They were like rooting out, or how do they say? Americans say routing out um, communists. Um, and so he found the story, like based like hundreds of years before, um, in a kind of religious kind of context where people who were like not following like the religiosity of like the community, kind kind of faithfully in the way that the community wanted them to, or whatever. Were like there was like a witch, they were like a witch. There was literally like a witch hunt. Yeah. Anyway, so have I answered your question?
Okay, so what were your creative influences during your childhood? You mentioned your father listening to Beethoven while painting.
Yeah, yeah, it was very, very
And
So
certainly
comforting.
many
how
of your paintings have musicians
musicians?
in them.
Oh yes, true, true.
So what
Yeah.
part did
Um,
music play in your?
I think it's very important. It definitely was like a very positive energy in our house, in our home, which could sometimes be fractured, and it was very soothing. And both made both of my parents very happy. They they both like either sang or whistled to the melodies and enjoyed them hugely and wanted to share them with us and would like point them out very excitedly and and found them very inspiring. Again, they were also like there was a camaraderie because in order to kind of everybody knows about poor suffering Beethoven and the great sort of sacrifices that he made in order to sort of somehow produce this most wondrous heavenly music, and it's really quite astonishing. Um, and so I think that they also felt an affinity and a belonging, and that so that's what we lived with, and it was very enriching and enjoyable.
We've also noticed in some of your artworks there is a figure. It's not a clearly painted figure, but there is a figure. I mean, it seems like an alter personality, or maybe it's your father who was not there, or maybe it's just something inside your head. And I'm just trying to get to some of those artworks where we see just floating
Figures
figures.
with abstract elements.
What's the genesis of that? What's the meaning of some of these?
It's interesting. Well, let's see now. I mean, I think that like I've always been kind of like aware of like ancestry, and we spoke about my mother's parents a lot, and indeed my father's parents, and and they were very kind of like present in our home. We spoke about them a lot, and there's actually an amazing film called Trikal, which is made by Sean Benegal. It's like set in Goa, and when this young man like decides to go on an ancestral quest, he travels from Bombay like down to Goa, and when he discovers his home, he encounters all these kind of ghosts like who are actually his ancestors, and I think it could be that. Um, could also be that like I think that we do carry that. We have like auras, and we have souls, and perhaps at different times like our souls are maybe merging in a oneness with our physicality, and at other times maybe hovering close to, um, or I don't know. So I'm not sure. I think I
No,
need to
that's right.
think.
But just before I forget, I just want to document the fact that you spoke about ancestry. And so one of the things we did today was go to Saligaon Church to see if you could get the baptism record for Souza. And obviously, they have taken note and they'll try and find the information. And it was also discovered that we discovered the ward that Souza lived in Saligaon. And we also discovered where his father is from, Asolna. And obviously, for people who know Goa, they will realize that both Asolna and Saligaon are generally where the very landed used to live. So we are on the cusp of, as soon as we get some of these baptism records,
Yeah,
of discovery of the entire ancestry of the clan.
amazing.
And there could be some surprises there. Um,
Praise God.
Anyway, I mean, these. Sorry, just to go back, these figures you spoke, are they? I mean, they were meant to be souls, or were they meant to be positive or negative? I mean, what are they? They are just something that is playing around in your mind. I mean, in a positive way, in a negative
I mean,
way.
I think probably both,
Okay.
but it's probably like a theme that I pushed around a lot because I tend to do that. I tend to kind of work in series and like get like a visual idea that seems to satisfy a kind of a some kind of psychological like quest or query or kind of like something that needs kind of aligning or something and so I go on a quest and there's lots of different versions. It could be that it could well be that it's both, but I'd love to see which ones you're referring to.
We will have additional conversations with exact paintings, but I guess we can just
Oh, that would
go
be cool. Yeah, that would be really good. Yeah.
go ahead with the.
So I'll ask about art college now.
Oh, okay.
So your
Why
time with
why the mincing? Why the? Oh God!
Because I suppose because college is a place where you learn.
Right.
I didn't learn. I learned how to roll a cigarette there.
Which is fine. I mean, it's actually college is a place where you make friends and be social. I mean,
True, true.
you find yourself
you
there.
find yourself
It's
there. So
true. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I found myself, but I definitely wouldn't have minded learning some things. Yeah. But so, did you want to finish
Yeah.
your question?
So at that time, when you weren't really able to learn art, what kinds of art movements were you interested in? I think you mentioned also once you were interested in American abstract expressionism
Well,
in
the thing is
around
that
that time.
sure. So, I mean, I became. It's kind of more like a. I don't know. Dare I say it? I had sort of had to become interested in
which years are we talking about here? We're talking about 70s.
76, 77, 78.
Your show was in 76. The
My degree show.
degree show around was in 76.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, you sure? Sure,
Yeah.
it wasn't so. Okay. Right. 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 Anyway, it's round about that time. So yeah. What was I thinking?
Abstract expressionism.
Abstract expressionism. Thank you. So yeah, the college, for some, interestingly, all the staff were like kind of unified as like passionate about abstract expressionism, and I suspect that they were abstract expressionist artists themselves. And when I first arrived there, I didn't know what abstract expressionism was. My father's like an expressive, figurative artist, and so like I was just only very conscious of that kind of art, and there was a lot of like talks given as well on the abstract expressionist art. So with a lot of in depth, like so we looked at like sand paintings that Jackson Pollock made that were influenced by his engagement with Native American art, um, and then he kind of somehow or other transitioned from those to his what he came to be more famously known for, his splash drip paintings. Mm. So all of these things are like very interesting in terms of like process and journey, and I suppose I came to just appreciate them because I suppose on some level that was all that was available. There wasn't anything else for me to learn from. In a way, of course, there was a library and there were lots of books, and there were some great books on Francis Bacon and um, there were like, and I liked a whole kind of host of different kinds of artists like David Hockney and Francis Bacon, who are obviously quite polarized, but in a way they're sort of similar, and they're both British. They write their subject matter. It's quite interesting.
isn't it kind of interesting that in the late mid to late 70s, I guess both the father and the daughter are painting and are also being introduced to abstract expressionism at the same time. You through your college and your father being in New York. Have you ever thought of that connection? Or were you in touch with your father at that?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank God I was, yeah. Yeah, we spoke, we wrote. There was a magic phone box in Camden where you could like kind of trick the phone into thinking it was making some local call or something. Everybody, the whole, it kind of like, went around
Everybody
like
knew about it.
everybody
Okay.
knew about it. There was like a queue to use it. It was like, it was amazing.
No, but isn't it? But I don't see uh, FN having. Uh, I don't remember on the top of my head if I've seen what I would call purely abstract expressionist works from him,
No,
but I do see some from you.
yeah.
So while both of you may have been exposed to the same movement at the same time, I guess FN did not really take to it.
Well, I think first of all, we were at different stages in our lives, in our journeys. He was already like very like established in his art making, in his language, in his style, um, in his aesthetic. So it was kind of like water off a duck's back for him. But whereas for me, there's like
It's a new thing you're assimilating.
it was quite kind of it was something I could I don't know, like, I could use, there were elements of that. But I'd say that actually, like, strictly speaking, that I shouldn't really have any, like, completely abstract works because I really have always felt completely, like, involved in figuration and that, like, I enjoy, like, the fusion and the coexistence of abstract with figuration. I find that really, really interesting. So I think if there are any like just abstract expressionist works, I think they're just unfinished. So I'll need
Or
those
leaning
back to
more
finish them.
towards what you would call figurative abstract. That's probably what you would describe some of his works as, like figurative, but losing the figure possibly.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, sometimes it's hard to put a finger on a painting after like 20 or 30 years. So we're just discussing the environment that you're painting in. I guess we could go on with the next question.
True, yeah.
You also mentioned that when you were in college, you used to paint in black and white mostly, and then later on you shifted to color.
Right.
So, how did this transition come about?
hmm So I think, yeah, I think that I don't think I kind of considered color. Somehow or other, it was quite incredible that I could have just like avoided it somehow. It wasn't something that kind of spoke to me. Like I was very, very interested in line and graphic art and um, yeah, like just I don't know, I suppose I was very tuned into kind of suffering as a kind of motif. It just endless it was endless like and from people like Kathy Kolovitz to George Groves to um, even like Hoffnung who's like a cartoonist. So, and then I think I enjoyed. Anyway, there's just like a whole host of, like a lot of artists, and actually a lot of them are Jewish. There's like Leon Kossoff and Albach, um, and so I think that they had a lot of graphic, like not not necessarily paintings that like really like spoke to me. And so I was kind of like looking and hunting, and I suppose very kind of open to being um, influenced and like looking for my own like voice as well as also like enjoying my father what my father did as well. But I think like being feeling like very important. It was very important to um, feeling like I wanted to find my own voice. Really, I suppose. Yeah.
So I've also noticed that you use a lot of blue in most of your works. So what does that color mean to you?
Hmm. Um, so I mean, I think that blue.
You're wearing blue as well.
Oh, wearing blue. That's true. Blue is like such an amazing color. It's one of the primary colors, but you can't make it. So along with red and yellow. So it's like it's intrinsic to the world that God has made, and it's like there used to be like a whole thing made about azure, azurus.
That's the sky. I mean, the blue, the azure sky. I guess it's
But
a.
there's like a rock that they used the pre-Raphaelites and Raphael. They used like this blue, and they would.
Azuli, no, lapis lazuli.
That's
Yeah,
it. That's it.
right.
Thank you. And they would like it was like gold, and it was very sought after and very prized, highly valued, and absolutely gorgeous. And so I'd say like blue is very interesting because it's definitely like for many many artists and jazz like the blues. It's like it's emotional, and it's the color of the sky, and it's the color of water, and it's it seems to be the color of emotions. It's the color of tears.
Can I ask you one particular question? When we had asked you this, you responded. One of your responses was, "But God has made the sky blue." But I noticed whenever you use the word God, it is like G-D. Is that any particular reason you do that?
Yeah, because in the Jewish tradition, you're not supposed to. It's out of respect and awe that if you kind of like seem to be kind of writing his name, it's almost like trying to kind of limit. Obviously, you can't limit God. God is unlimited. But it's a form of respect. Yeah,
So
yeah.
there was a method to the madness.
Thanks for
It wasn't just
noticing.
WhatsApp.
Yeah, my pen didn't run out of ink, and
Okay.
then like kind of suddenly kick into action for the D. Um, yeah,
Can I ask about the
bell size.
well size? Can I?
Sure. Can,
Please.
can, can we just this is we can cut this bit out, okay? Because I'm like I don't I think the last interview was like I feel like it was miles better than this one. I'm not. I feel like I'm not doing very well today.
It's okay. We'll cut out. I mean, sections
You just
that.
have to cut it all out. I think.
No, no.
Just leave her Sharon. Just
No, no, no. You're doing quite well. You'd be
I'm
surprised once we collate it and how it'll
Yeah.
look. So don't worry.
seriously.
It's
Gosh.
important getting the artist's perspective. I think we've discussed this. The narrative and the history and the background are what makes the
I
artist.
suppose the thing. I suppose what it is that for me, I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over and over because you're asking me these questions. I've already answered, but for the audience, they haven't. This is the first time they're hearing it.
That's right.
So that's
That's
what I
right.
really.
And the purpose of asking you the questions in text beforehand was to make you think,
Mm.
so that you
Ah,
can think about.
so clever. Where did you learn that? You went to college. You went to a college where they taught you something.
So this is to help you think about your life because we're taking you back 30, 40 years, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
we
agonizing.
can't put you on the spot and expect you to remember everything.
It's
So
good. It's good. Hopefully, it will. It's good brain
so I'll,
gym.
I'll follow up with that question. So this whole thing of Bell Size Park comes up time and time again, which was your home when FN was there. And it was interesting to me to note that Belsize Park's claim to fame was because central London, because of all the coal burning, was actually heavily polluted. It's something that a lot of cities can relate to, and it kind of
All the
gives you
smog.
all the smog, and it kind of gives you a positive feeling as well in the sense that the smog can be tackled and that the pollution can be removed if there is a desire. So that's good to know. But so after Belsize Park, I mean, you were narrating this event where you almost in the mid 70s ended up becoming a squatter, right? I mean,
Oh, how could you?
how could I? Well, it's nothing in Bombay. There's tons of squatters. I mean, there's nothing.
Oh, was I in good company?
Well, well, I wouldn't say good company, but it's accepted
In
company,
company.
in company. Yeah, so, some company.
Some company.
So we
Not
just
alone.
not alone.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to connect this dots to is we look at the exhibition that you did in Ravensburg College, and I think we've discussed this. The artworks are very dark, and at the same time, you are essentially a squatter, and really, and you say that you hardly learned anything in college. I mean, you were not happy with what you learned, and you were mostly rolling cigarettes at that time. I mean, so this was like a defined moment for you. I mean, the art was your defiance against everything that you're going through, right? Or what? How do you put your art in perspective in the 70s, I guess, in the early 80s, and how did it change after that? I mean,
So yeah, that's all true. Yeah, I guess so. I guess yeah. I guess like art was like definitely like my medium, my way of expressing like all the different kind of issues that were going on for me and things I felt and thought and read about and heard about and discussed and um, with friends and gained from other art and yeah, it was a whole kind of melting pot
how
in
was
there.
the environment? You mentioned melting pot. How was the environment at that time? I mean, were a lot of meetings in salons or cafes where people used to discuss art and talk about what's happening everywhere and discuss each other's art and what they have accomplished? I mean, how was the environment in 70s and 80s London? I mean, was it? I mean, the Paris was obviously well known for all the modernism that started there, and Picasso, Monet, I mean, and a plethora of other artists.
Yeah,
London had its own, Bacon, and Hockney. The 70s must have been very early for
also
them
the
as well.
Chelsea club that they would go to.
Chelsea Club.
Yeah, but I never went there. I should have
Does
done.
that club still exist?
Yes, it does.
And it's called the
And
Chelsea Club.
actually, Souza went there.
Was that a meeting place for people? I
It's a
mean,
meeting place for artists. Yeah, yeah, we could like find out more about it. Yeah, well, I think we
okay,
should
that's it.
go there. We should book a pint.
We have a lot of trips planned, by the way. Solna. Now we have the Chelsea Club. So the trips are adding up.
Fantastic.
I
Bring them
shall
on.
continue. What's the next?
Given this context, I was just about to ask you, how have your surroundings played a role in shaping the art that you've made? For example, right now you're in Goa, so how has that kind of affected your creative process?
Well, it's just amazingly inspirational to be here, and also because it's my father's,
Birthplace.
birthplace. Yeah, so it's like it's just such a blessing, and it is just really gorgeous to look at, and there's so much inspiration. So I have done, some sketches, and I'd love to like work them up into paintings, like just like if you can imagine just the palm, the trees, and the buildings, and people walking with umbrellas, like with saris, whatever. It's just just amazing. All the activity going on, the colours, and
Well, we can see that this room is strewn with artworks from Goa. We have the banana cellar. We have another your version of the Red Road out there, and then
oh yeah, I never thought about that.
right. I mean, so it's subconscious, but it's there. That's what you see, and you have. But I want to focus on something though, in the sense that what we see right now is quite different than your earlier period. And we have discussed this cliched word, that not cliched, but the word that you've used, given again by your father. What is that? Ugly bugly.
Yeah.
So sometimes, he would say, "Oh, this work is really ugly bugly," which I find really odd because I mean he was, the master of it.
To be honest, I'm not sure that he was referring to his own work.
No, he was referring to your work. That's when he saw your
Maybe,
work. You said that he said, "Oh, this is too ugly bugly" or something like that.
maybe
But
no. I think actually the story that I'd heard was that he was referring to another artist,
another
but I'm not
artist.
sure whether to mention the name of that artist because it feels a bit
That's
cruel and a bit
irrelevant. But
mean.
what it leads to is a good segue into the discussion
But
of.
I could name him if you
I,
like. It's quite interesting.
it's not needed, but the discussion of modernism in context of ugly bugly or decorative. I mean, what is your definition? I mean, you've spoken at it off and on. We spoke about the narrative and all of those things, and what is your thought on it?
Well, I think it's really interesting, yeah, because there's obviously an aesthetic that's like gone that runs through the story of art. There was classical art, there was like a whole, what was considered, aesthetically pleasing and what was beautiful and like what isn't, and all the kind of like plaster casts and marble carvings and those kind of very, delicate like um, figures and profiles and all of those things that were like to sort of probably to recover from like one war after another or whatever, right? Or to proclaim that a nation was like fairer than another nation. Or I don't know the different rationales, but yeah.
So my problem with a lot of these definitions is even if you look at some of the old Indian bronzes or the marble statues or what we call Ajanta, Ellora, and all these things. Uh, so they say modernism is something which allows the artist to have his own creative expression beyond what you actually see in a photo or in a 3D representation. But a lot of these old sculptures also, I mean, the form of the sculpture or the dimensions of how they've been made do not conform to may not conform to exact human dimensions. Things have been exaggerated. Throughout the figures and so on and so forth. And so, in a sense, artists have always had some creative allowance, even 500 years ago, when they made something that looked pretty, yes, but it need not have been something that was exactly conforming to dimensions of what they were trying to depict. Uh, so that's one. And secondly, I wanted to discuss with you, and I think we discussed a little bit of that yesterday, your thinking on, and the whole idea is to get your thoughts on art. Your thinking on, I mean, you mentioned this famous artist Greenberg, who called pop art as kitsch. Uh, but 20 years hence, today you will not call Andy Warhol or Liechtenstein or some of these guys as kitsch at all. They are definitely part of the modern movement. Now, is it that we always, and it's very difficult to do, the narrative we always follow seems to be something as prevalent as of today, and it kind of blocks your mind, I think. I mean, I'm just trying to, without putting any words in your mouth, I'm just trying to get your understanding of what modern art is and what makes a successful modern art. And again, the question itself is incorrect, because if we are defining what is successful, then it's already putting blinkers on our heads and creating problems for the next generation. But I still like to get your thoughts on you mentioned Clement Greenberg. I mean, was he wrong about pop art? I mean, oh, did he not see, or what? And I ask this because it's a lot of your art is very different, and it would take a lot more analysis. You probably need to go through each of the artworks one by one, and kind of gain some more of your thoughts. I mean, you don't conform to rules. So an art critic that may look at your work, they say, "Oh, I don't see a Picasso in there, or I don't see a so and so artist in there," and so therefore it's it's
Worthless.
it's worthless. But is that putting blinders on? I mean, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to
No,
lose.
no, it's fine. You can carry on talking because I'm trying, I'm trying to move around. It's like this question is like this huge sculpture, and I'm trying to like figure out how I'm going to approach it.
I
And
mean, somebody just messaged me about a Chola sculpture. Okay, that's a classic example, really rare Indian sculpture from the Chola period. But the figures are definitely exaggerated. There is no question about that.
okay,
There is absolutely no question. The figures are exaggerated. I mean,
you mean they're not realistic?
they're not. They don't conform to realism. They're pretty. They're very pretty. They're powerful. They have an energy. But the artist has. But we never consider that to be modern art. That's considered antiquity, sculpture. Nobody ever uses the word modern for them. Modern art generally refers to something. I guess we have put a period on that. 1905 or
Oh, I'd really like to see them.
post Cezanne or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So where does your art fit in all of this? I'm sorry, I've been rambling. I need to stop and let you talk.
No, no, it's fine. I actually don't know. I don't know where it fits in. I think I'm kind of like quite eclectic, and I think that I a bit like collect things that I fancy that I like the look of that speak to me, not necessarily just because they look nice or interesting, because they have like an edginess, a depth, something that really kind of speaks to me that I want to include. It's a bit like making a collage, like with like bits of found materials, but it's also you can also make a collage with like stylistically as well. So I'm kind of interested in all of those things, but at the same time, what's important is that a picture at the end of the day is a picture and it needs to succeed like on its own kind of terms, and it can't include everything. And it's like also what you kind of have to leave out as well, and as well as what you put in, and it's just like it's kind of just a whole really interesting thing because at some point, there's been a lot of like quotes of artists, being asked like, when is a picture like finished, and some people have answered when it has a life of its own.
We've been having that argument in the last few hours. When is a picture finished? So when is a picture finished? Is it when the artist has signed the picture? That's a mark. That's generally considered to be the point that people say that it's finished. But having said that, I know people have signed them in pictures and then taken another 10 years to make changes to it, and then signed again. I mean, there's artworks. An artist we represent, 1957-67,
Wow.
done over 10 years.
Wow. Well, that's incredibly kind of conscientious, and I feel for myself personally that like when the work, like literally, it feels like it's speaking for itself. It's like a child. The child is like very 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 dependent on you up to a certain age, and then like it can launch itself and start walking and talking back at you.
And that's when you think it's ready.
Yeah, yeah. In a way, it's like it's able to speak to other people now, like without any further input
That's a great analogy,
from you.
actually. That's a great analogy. Next question, Sean.
So, so you mentioned that when you experienced motherhood, that was when your palette kind of changed and you started kind of painting more colorful works, domestic life, still lives. So how was that?
Totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's exactly that. And just there was like just an explosion and a connection and a kind of an awakening, like to life, to positivity. It's like kind of oh, there's a sun shining. It's not just like all like the world isn't black and white. There's all this like extraordinary colour, and yeah, bringing a life into the world, and being like honoured and blessed to like become a mother is like just so profound, and it was incredibly like healing, I'd say, and just so like positive on every level. So it did completely change my palette, as you say.
Not completely.
Well, no, it was complete actually. Yeah, in a very good way, and very happily so. And hopefully continues to be. And then of course, there's so much that you can do with color, and you can also be very graphic with color. And then of course, you can like create like all sorts of like tonal language with color, which is really really like incredible, and can make it like very like structured, which I'm enjoying. And yeah, there's so about that.
So just looking at your artworks, I mean, Harshan spoke about black and white artworks, and then obviously we've seen some quite a few still lifes post, I guess, your first child, which are very colorful. And now I see in the canvases around us, you've shifted to a palette of green. I mean, there's a lot of green in your art now. And is that because you look outside in Goa and it's all green?
I think so. I mean,
So
there's a
you've
lot of
just
green here.
imbibed that in, I mean, your art. I mean, the three canvases I look out here, they're all very green.
There's a lot of green.
There's
Yeah,
a lot of green.
there's a lot of green matter. Yeah, well, Goa's like it's like kind of being in a jungle and a Garden of Eden at the same time. It's very lush and it's incredibly green, and it's going to take a bit of adjustment, like not seeing so much green, being in like a kind of
Continue what we missed out,
concrete.
Harshan. Thanks.
Yeah.
Let's finish the
How are
questions one
you
by
doing?
one.
How are you doing?
10 minutes more to go, and that's it.
Oh, it's pretty much done. I had two questions. How would you describe your change in mediums over the years?
Yeah, mediums. You've used mediums all over the place. I mean, you've done oil on prime paper. You've done, I mean, and you've done acrylics. You've used pens. I mean, I see it behind your studio. I'm not sure if you can see that. There's tons of different kinds of paints and brushes.
Mm-hmm.
So you seem to be experimenting quite a bit, and that's throughout your life, right? I mean,
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I think that I think that's also. I mean, I think there's a strength in that, and I think that there's, definitely, it's been a whole like. I think some interesting things have come from that, but at the same time, I think that I would like to kind of like really like learn more about oil painting and like push that and really kind of develop
why
that more.
oil and why not acrylic? So, I mean,
Well, because oil is just kind of naturally, ironically, it's more plastic than acrylic. It's that's very ironic actually, because with oil you can create extraordinary translucencies, and you can push it and pull it, um, and of course in a way it's more forgiving because it takes much longer to dry, so you can make adjustments, you can do major surgery. Whereas, like, you can as well with acrylic, but
so
it's
that's
very
the
different.
antithesis of many of the artists today who prefer acrylic because it's really fast to dry. They don't have to wait for a day or a day and a half before
Sure, there are
the
big
canvas dries. So
advantages.
there's huge advantages.
Sure, and you can also put in mediums into oil paint to make them dry faster, and maybe dry as fast as acrylics. There's probably all that available. We live in amazing times. We've got everything available to us. You can actually get water-based oil paints that you don't have to use terps with. You can use water with them.
Because some people actually are allergic to terps.
True, and for perhaps for other reasons as well. It's very like amazing that such a thing exists. So I yeah, I mean, just because I suppose also because there's a whole tradition. All the art like before acrylics. Like when did acrylics come on? My dad was like one of the first exponents of acrylics, and I think he
Mhm.
was even sponsored by an acrylic company. I think possibly. So that would probably have been in the 60s. So imagine, like prior to the 60s, like all painting was oil
Oil
paint,
painting.
which is
And prior to that was tempera. So
right, exactly, which I've never tried. I have never tried that.
that's I mean, even more time consuming because you have to constantly make the paint. But again,
Wow.
16th, 17th century, I mean, there's a lot of tempera art. I mean,
Well, they probably had a whole host of apprentices,
they did.
an army of them, mixing up egg and whatever it was.
They did.
I think last time I looked, I didn't have one of those, but I wouldn't mind.
Any other questions?
That's it. Yes.
How do you see yourself? I mean, I see what you're focusing now is on Goan landscape, but they are not. But this is very different than your abstract figurative works done early on. So would we expect to see the next set of canvases, being, I mean, the figure going or
Definitely. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of floating figures and
floating
disappearing
figures?
figures half in the canvas, half out. Where is the picture frame? Where is the, like where is the stage?
We'll end with this. A famous art critic has said, which I frankly never understood entirely, that it is not important what's in the painting. It's what's more important is what's out of the painting.
Well, that's like John Cage's piece of music, which is silent.
So
Silence for, I don't know, so many minutes and seconds.
So theoretically, you could have a completely white canvas and say, "Hey, but you're not seeing what's outside the canvas." So anyway, it's just a joke.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like a bit interesting because when you paint, when you go outside, when you learn how to do landscape and stuff, you use what's called a viewfinder, which is like a piece of cardboard or whatever with like a square cut in the middle of it. And you go around and you're supposed to be able to kind of like match the square, the window that you've found in the landscape.
I think that's what's called perspective. They were called perspective machines.
Okay.
And in 1920s, in fact, and not that it was invented here, but there was a famous artist called Atul Bose as well, who invented this, who wrote a book on called Verified Perspective. And he was one of the greats at that time. But yeah.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, Karen, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Have a good trip.
Thank you.
We promise to barrage you with more questions, but we will let you enjoy a month and a half with the family. And again, the whole exercise of this was to get in the artist's head, to think of what, to put some method behind the madness, to put narrative behind the artworks. And obviously, and this is something I've mentioned to you before as well, there is a lot of depth in your work because you've been through a lot. And that doesn't necessarily mean economic. It means you've seen a lot of literature and culture and places, and your art is a mix of it all. And experiences are rich, is what I'm saying. So, and therefore, the art is very diverse.
Okay, great. I mean, I don't know what it's like on your, on the other side to experience it. So it's great to get feedback.
No, as I said, we've had discussions with you about, hey, is this finished? Is it not finished? Finished? Not finished? It's like, no, it's finished.
That's
and they were
true.
like, you're like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
So,
But even just a conversation about the ones that I consider finished would be most welcome.
No, absolutely. So, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And another super interview.
Thank you, Hajar.
And
Thank you.
thank you.